Is the House District 34 Candidate Forum, which is being live streamed on One Hood Power Facebook and YouTube page. This forum is being brought to you this evening with support from the New Pennsylvania Project, Straight Ahead, and One Hood Power. We want to thank you all for joining us this evening as we host candidates for the House District 34 representative position. Let's talk about what these positions are. So the Pennsylvania House of Representatives is the lower chamber of the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Alongside the Pennsylvania State Senate, it forms the legislative branch of the Pennsylvania state government and works alongside the governor of Pennsylvania to create laws and establish a state budget. Legislative authority and responsibilities of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives include passing bills on public policy matters, setting levels for state funding, raising and lowering taxes, and voting to uphold or override gubernatorial vetoes. So how this is all going to work tonight, the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the question posed to them and 30 seconds, actually it's going to be a minute, to respond to any comment directly that's about them. And then at the end of this, for all of you watching, we are going to have some time for question and answers with each candidate. So just make sure that you submit those comments to us and we'll look at them and give you a chance to correspond with the candidates here today. And now let's go ahead and take a listen to a word from our sponsors.
When you go into an elected official's office and you ask them to fix a pothole or put a stoplight where it needs to be, they're going to go and look at your voter file and find out if you're someone who's actually casting your ballot consistently. We have elected officials in Harrisburg who are trying to take our rights to vote away and put unnecessary barriers in front of them. There's people that are working 2 and 3 jobs and they just don't have time to go to the polls on a Tuesday in November when it's cold and they don't have childcare or they don't have transportation to the polls. We need to make sure that access to the ballot is easier, not harder. This is the time to take action. It's going to take all of us.
Register to vote and encourage others to do the same. Visit thenewpaproject.org to learn more and join our fight.
If everyone exercises their right to vote, their voices will be heard, not only in the halls of Harrisburg, but in the halls of Congress in DC. The New Pennsylvania Project believes in low propensity voters' ability to become super voters.
All right, so let's go ahead and introduce our guests, the candidates this evening, shall we? First, we have Abigail Salisbury. Abigail is the incumbent state representative for District 34 and was elected in February 2023's special election. Previously, she served on Swissvale Borough Council for 5 years. In her first year as state rep, Salisbury worked to deliver on her commitment to the 13 municipalities in her district by working to increase availability of grant information, providing grants training, and hosting intermunicipal meetings of elected officials. Building on her past experience as a sole practitioner attorney for nonprofits and as an executive director, she founded the PA Charitable Nonprofit Caucus, which is a bipartisan entity aimed at improving the state's relationship with services to charities in the state. Salisbury passed bills aimed at fighting blight and improving grant writing assistance to municipalities with low-income census tracts in 2023, among other legislative initiatives. And she hopes to continue building on these successes in 2024 and beyond. Next, we have Ashley Comans. Ashley is a local mom and organizer, a member of the Wilkinsburg School Board, and First Lady of Wilkinsburg. Ashley works for Healthy Start, Inc. in Pittsburgh. which is in the marketing, communications, and development sector as a coordinator. There, she supports the marketing and outreach and advocacy work happening for maternal child health care in Allegheny and Westmoreland counties. She is a big advocate for giving back and helping to build up the youth in our region. She's also a campaign director for the Pittsburgh Moms Rising Fellowship. Ashley serves as vice chair of Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, a founding board member of Unite, and a board of directors for Pittsburgh Urban Magnet Project, also known as PUMP. She was named Incline Magazine Who's Next Politics 2018, the 2018 Young Democrat of the Year by the Allegheny County Young Democrats, and a 2019 Pittsburgh Magazine 40 Under 40 honoree. Ashley is an alumni of Clarion University of Pennsylvania, where she obtained her BA in Mass Media Arts, Journalism, and Communications Studies. So we're going to start asking some questions now. We're going to get into that portion of tonight's programming. Again, both candidates are going to have 2 minutes to respond to these questions and then 1 minute to respond to any possible rebuttal. So let's go ahead and start off with this question. And we can start with Abigail on this one. How will you work with the state senators on the opposite side of the aisle where bills tend to get held up or sometimes obstructed?
Sure. So that's something I've already had the opportunity to do. One of the things that I was really trying to do was move along Representative Malcolm Kenyatta's bill to change the date of the election. I'm the first Jew to hold this seat in District 34. And unfortunately, I don't know if everybody knows this, but our election is scheduled for Passover. So that means that a lot of people are going to be disenfranchised just because of their religion, which I find unacceptable. And even for people who aren't that observant, they might be going and visiting family. So imagine if the election were scheduled for Thanksgiving or something along those lines. I made a point of engaging in some grassroots advocacy work. So along with some other members of the Pittsburgh area Jewish community, I led a visit to Harrisburg for rabbis, Jewish poll workers, Jewish voters who wanted to go to Harrisburg and ask to please have the election moved by having the Senate vote for Representative Kenyatta's bill. We met with a variety of Republican senators, many of whom I had never met before, but we just went into their offices and spoke with them. We did a second effort, which we called babka diplomacy, where we baked cinnamon babkas for every senator in the state Senate. The idea being that we were trying to reach out to them in a positive way, not in a haranguing way. We did another visit to Harrisburg. Now, I have to tell you, I failed. I did not change the election date. The election is still on Passover. But what I was able to do by engaging in that conversation was speak to people about anti-Semitism in Pennsylvania, which has increased 400% just in the last few months, and also engage people who I never would have had an opportunity to talk about Jewish issues with. And I encourage them to go back home and engage with the Jews who live in their own district. So even though I failed at that, I consider it kind of a win because I had an opportunity to really talk to people I never would have even met before.
All right. Ashley, we'll go ahead and throw it over to you.
Me, as a school board director, right, we serve on a board where we're, all Democrats, but at the same time, it requires you to work with people who you have different viewpoints and just don't see things the same way. So one, that's just a matter of me being open to having conversations, and in particular with people when I disagree or we don't agree on things, still being able to bring your different positions and perspectives into the conversation. And then another thing that I think is really important about this work in organizing and building on power within our community is also recognizing that there's some people that you unfortunately just can't change. And so right now in our state house, we currently have a majority by 1 seat. And so I think, one, the power is to increase that majority, and that requires us getting out into the community, mobilizing and organizing in our communities, and also doing the same thing with the Senate. We are really close to being able to flip the Senate. And I think the way that we go about working with the Senate is going in and connecting with our currently democratically elected senators and strategizing and organizing and mobilizing and figuring out how are we going to flip those seats, see a trifecta here in Pennsylvania and actually move policies that are going to impact and positively support communities. Like when we talk about we need to fairly fund our public schools, and when we're talking about we need to increase the minimum wage and things like paid family and medical leave, right? These are things that we can continue to work for and fight for. But the way we do that is by not trying to convince people that don't want to change. What we do is we build power, we flip our Senate, and we get the work done.
Right. So you both touched on some issues that you would like to address if elected. And so I think that's a good launching point into our next question, which is, what would your top 3 priorities be if you were elected? Ashley, we'll give you this one.
Yes, thank you, Royce. So I'm a school board director, right? So one of my top issues, I'm a mom, I have 2 young children. My daughter attends our public schools. Our schools are not being fairly funded. The Commonwealth Court has already stated that Pennsylvania does not constitutionally fund our public schools. So that means we need to be fighting for funds to invest in our schools, invest in our teachers, whether we're talking about infrastructure, whether we're talking about making sure that no matter where you live, no matter what your zip code is, it shouldn't define how well of an education that you receive. All of our children deserve to have that. So that's one of my top issues that I most certainly would be fighting for. Also, care infrastructure. Like you shared in my bio, I've done a lot of work with Moms Rising. And when we think about taking care of our communities, how we're able to care for one another, whether it's a family bringing home a new child or someone taking care of an elderly parent or just a loved one who is falling on hard times and needs support, we should be able to provide that kind of support to our families without it being a detriment to our livelihoods because we can't pay the bills that we need to pay. So things like paid family and medical leave, affordable childcare, these are things that I would be, a huge leader and advocate for. And also, our minimum wage is $7.25. That is inhumane. We need to increase our minimum wage to $18 an hour in Pennsylvania. It's just what we're doing doesn't work for our communities. We are seeing it when people can't put food on their tables. They can't pay their rent. They can't provide for the necessities that their families need. We need to meet the needs of what our communities still are fighting for. And so those would be the top priorities for me when elected.
Thanks. Abigail, how about you? Top 3 priorities if elected.
So the ones that were just named were fantastic, but I'm going to pick things to try not to overlap. One of the biggest things for me is infrastructure. We have a crumbling infrastructure in District 34. One of the reasons I first got involved in working on infrastructure problems is Swissvale's Borough Council no longer has a place to meet because Swissvale's Borough building collapsed in March of 2020. The council chambers fell through the roof of Department of Public Works and part of the police station, and that building is no more. We then start to look around us and we see the streets caving in because the sewers underneath the streets are failing. Sewers might not be the sexiest campaign issue, but you miss them when they don't work, because I have a lot of people who call my office because their sewer pipes have broken and they've flooded their basements. There's no insurance coverage for that, by the way. You're stuck just paying for it by yourself. So we have to get that infrastructure moving, and I'm very excited to say that we've got some investment in that department from the federal government and the state. But those are huge investments that we have to make that are statewide and very focused on the district infrastructure as well. Reforming charter school funding, particularly, I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of a bill with Representative Cerisi to reform the way that cyber charters are funded so that it matches up more with the way that the expenses actually come out, so that we match that up with the funding that's given out matches up with the cost of the education. Finally, one of the biggest things that people hear me harp on all the time is grants. We need to get these small municipalities up to the level where they can receive the same millions of dollars in grant funding that wealthier municipalities can receive, so that places like Braddock Borough are getting just as much grant money as a very affluent community in another district might be. So we need to make sure that we have the municipal grant assistance program put in this year's appropriations. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. So you both touched on education a bit, but in seemingly different ways. So curious, what is your position on the debate surrounding school funding and school choice? Abigail, who did I give the last one to? I think this is your turn. This is your turn to answer first. So I'll let you expand on that.
Absolutely. So I'm fortunate to serve on the Appropriations Committee. I'm in Harrisburg right now. That's why I'm in a hotel room. You can see the bed in the background. And we have 3 straight weeks of appropriations hearings wherein we meet with every department in the state government. We get to ask them whatever questions we want about putting the state budget together. It's very unusual for a freshman to get that, so I'm very proud to be able to offer that to my district. Tomorrow, we have a solid day, all day, of hearings about education. And from my perspective, one thing that's incredibly important to address is the special education funding loophole. So that is an issue wherein people who decide to send their kids to charter schools, the money that goes into the charter school is drawn from that public school. So when a child leaves, they take money out of the public school to the charter school with them. An issue that's not often talked about is the cost of transporting those kids, because the school district has to bear the cost of that, and it's immense. However, when they go to that charter school, if they're diagnosed with a disability, I myself have a disability. I am diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So someone like me would then be entitled to have additional funding come along with me to the charter school. However, everybody gets the same flat fee for special education assistance, whether they have something that maybe requires half an hour of care a week, like maybe a speech pathology issue, or one-on-one very intensive care 5 days a week in school. That's something that doesn't make sense. We have to make sure that the money that is going to these charter schools for special education matches up with the actual cost of the services that are being provided. So that's something that we can really save the state millions upon millions upon millions of dollars by making sure that the money that goes out actually goes into those kids' educations. Thanks.
All right, Ashley, your turn to respond. What is your position on the debate around school funding and school choice?
Yeah, so when we're talking about school funding, I think it's really important that we are specific when we say school choice. What we've recently seen in regards to vouchers and using public funds for private and parochial schools, that should not happen. Public funds should go to public schools, and period. In addition to that, when we're getting around to as Abigail shared, transportation, things in regards to property taxes being the main source of funding for our public schools. Property taxes cannot adequately fund our public schools, and we begin to see what happens across districts like Woodland Hills, Wilkinsburg, and Pittsburgh public schools. The property taxes are just not, it's not equitable. It then brings us into that conversation of around your zip code then determines how well your education is, and that is just unacceptable. We think that there's not the same level of accountability that we are holding for our charter schools and compared to our public schools. And I think that should be a level playing field, and we need to be holding them accountable. And I also know most recently with Senator Lindsey Williams, where she discussed about funding another cyber charter school when we're already seeing that our current public schools are not receiving the adequate funds. And then we begin to pay for another cyber charter school. That's not the answer to getting to the solutions of our public schools actually receiving the funds that they need. There is no reason why we continue to say we need more funds, and then we continuously receive back vouchers, school choice. The school choice should be our home schools. The school choice should be the school that's around the corner from your house. That's why I ran for school board, right? Because I knew whenever I wanted to have children one day, I didn't want to have to pay for private school or send my kid across town taking hours early in the morning to get them to school. It was important that we're investing in our home schools because that's the foundation and the pillar of our communities.
Thank you. I want to stay on education for just a bit and pose the question about trans youth and what your plans would be to put some safeguards in place for transgender students in our schools in this particular district and beyond. Ashley, we'll start with you on this.
Yes, I think that when we're thinking about our students and their safety, it's really important that we are focusing on our kids and what is safe, right? When we're thinking about things for our school district, like school renovations, right? And something as simple as bathrooms. I've always said this conversation when there was this debate about the girls and the boys' bathrooms. Why do we even have open stalls where young people are going in? I remember when I was a student in school, and you're even afraid to go to the bathroom and do whatever you need to do in the bathroom because you don't want someone else to hear you, when we can just have its infrastructure of how we're setting up our schools for that type of safety. How are we also focusing on our students' mental health and the supports that they may need to have to feel safe in their schools and to feel like people are supporting and listening to them? Too often we don't have the counselors in our schools. We don't have the supports for kids to feel like they are welcomed and loved, and ensuring that we're making sure our classroom sizes are adequate so that teachers can give the attention that our young people need. These are things when we're thinking about truly investing in and creating an atmosphere for learning, and not being focused on these narratives that bring fear, instead of truly just focusing on the education that our kids need, and not making this about, as I would always say, from like an out of school workspace, like ultimately it's the adults who suck in these spaces. If we actually listen to our young people, allow them to tell us what they need, and then we respond to that, we provide those resources for the community.
All right, Abigail, you?
Sure. So I happen to be the first out LGBTQIA person who has ever served in District 34 as state rep, which I'm really proud of. But I also want to acknowledge that we never know what people may have felt in their heart prior to times when we can talk about these things. So I always want to acknowledge that I'm the first out one, but we never know. Maybe there was another person who had that in their heart before and wasn't able to say anything. Like many women who are diagnosed with autism, I haven't always identified that way. I was assigned female at birth, and I have not, although I'm generally, I guess, female presenting, it's not something that I've always identified with myself. So I tend to say that I'm non-gender conforming. So the issue of talking about trans children is incredibly close to my heart. It was something that when I was in school, nobody dared even talk about. It was a different time. I feel like I sound like I'm 175 years old, but it was just a different time. And so I'm very proud to have spoken on the steps of the Capitol in Harrisburg about signing on to legislation to protect trans kids, to make it possible also for them to grow up and enjoy the same rights that we have for everyone in Pennsylvania right now. For instance, if you have a trans kid, you can be evicted from your apartment because there's no protection for you at the state level. So that's something that we're working on in Harrisburg too. Focusing specifically on schools, I'm sure we've all heard and seen the horrible news stories of trans kids who were attacked and even recently killed as a result of prejudice in schools. So we have to educate the educators to make sure that these spaces are safe. There's a lot of focus on bathrooms, but there's more to school than just bathrooms. So we have to make sure that everyone feels safe all day.
Thank you, Abigail. I want to get into the topic of reproductive rights and get your perspective on where you are at on that issue, and if you would introduce some form of legislation to codify protections if elected. Ashley, this will be yours first.
Yeah, so you stated earlier, actually my role with I work for Healthy Start, a maternal and child health focused organization here in the greater Pittsburgh region. And I serve now as the media and government relations manager. So recently, this past October, the state legislature launched the Black Maternal Health Caucus. My team and I went up to Harrisburg to participate and be a part of this caucus and the work that is happening, because we do have a maternal health crisis happening right now in Pennsylvania and honestly across this country. And specifically here in Pennsylvania, the numbers specifically for Black women are disproportionately higher. And so that is a part of my why. When I started working for Healthy Start, it was something that I was aware of, but didn't actually recognize that my own personal birthing experience was an anomaly for a woman that looks like me. And so things like ensuring that we are providing care for women and birthing folks with a doula. We know when we place a doula in a room with our women and birthing folks, it automatically increase positive birth outcomes for the advocacy that is happening in the room when someone is giving birth. Also things that we have recently seen, I want to say this was about April, the extension of Medicaid coverage from 30 days to a year for moms and birthing folks postpartum. Those are things that are needed. It's the beginning of how we begin to strengthen healthcare and healthcare access for women and birthing folks. And we also have to, again, talk about our reproductive justice and our reproductive rights. These are fights that we are literally still in. This is the moment where we must protect that. And right now, Pennsylvania is like a beacon for neighboring states who don't have that access. So I think it's really important that here in Pennsylvania, we are strengthening and supporting our medical professionals and also making sure we're providing that access so that people can receive the needed health care that we deserve.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Abigail, your turn.
Couldn't agree more. I think that that's all incredibly important. I joined on to the Black Maternal Health Caucus because I think that the statistics surrounding maternal mortality in Pennsylvania and frankly in the United States as a whole are horrifying. So I couldn't agree more with everything that was just said. So I'm going to take a little bit of a pivot. I'm going to say that something that we need to focus on is reproductive choice. And that means not just choice in the sense of pro-choice, which I am pro-choice, but also the choice of the ability to engage in reproductive technologies. So I want to give a shout out to my good friend Lisa Sobel, who is a plaintiff in Kentucky because she engaged in IVF technologies here in Pennsylvania and then moved to Kentucky. But it is not at all clear that after she had her first child through IVF, she would be able to use the embryos that she created through IVF in Pennsylvania to have a child in Kentucky. We've seen through recent court decisions and legislation around the country that is not at all a right that is protected in many states. So I'm very proud of her for suing Kentucky to be able to move forward with that along with two other people. But also one thing that we have to keep in mind is it's all well and good if we have the right to engage in these technologies, but what if you don't have the money? We don't have a way for people to engage in IVF technologies to have children if you don't have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through IVF treatments. People do huge fundraisers to be able to do this. It's not right. We don't have even basic funding for healthcare in this country, let alone for reproductive technologies. So that's something that I would like to have enshrined in Pennsylvania law, is that you have a right to access these reproductive technologies if you so choose.
All right. Thank you, Abigail. So let's take a bit of a pivot and talk economics for a minute. I'm curious, what do you guys believe that your role would be with this position in reducing poverty? We know so many people are impacted by this here in our area at or below poverty level. So what do you think your position has? What role do you think your position has in reducing that strain for the people that you would be representing? Abigail, this is yours first.
This district is really interesting in its economic diversity because we have areas where you can walk across the street and go from a community where the average household annual income is $29,000 to an area where the average household annual income is $129,000. So we have huge economic disparity in this district, just in the tiny, few square miles that it really represents. So that is a microcosm of the problems across the state. One of the big issues, of course, minimum wage. Nobody's, questioning in the Democratic caucus that minimum wage has to go up. It's a shame when we're below Ohio and West Virginia surrounding us. That has to get fixed. Realistically, though, I'm a small business owner. I believe in the power of small business to lift up individual entrepreneurs as well as whole communities. I've seen it work from starting my business in Wilkinsburg 9 years ago. And I have many friends who it's totally changed their lives. It's changed my life. So I think that one of the big issues that we have to address in modifying people's lives, and I always say that I have the safety, service, success motto. The success is, what does success mean to you? Define your own success. I want to create the opportunity for you to decide what success means. So that means we have to create opportunities for people. That means we have to provide them with a high quality public education so that they are set up in order to go into a trade, to go to college if that's what they want, to start a business. But we have to give people those basic fundamental skills. And then one thing not a lot of people talk about, and I did a tour around our district on this issue right after I got elected, is let's say you want to start a business. Where are you going to put it? In one of our blighted downtowns where people have abandoned these commercial properties for decades and there's no way to go in without $500,000 to renovate them, and no small entrepreneur has that ability? Come on now. We have to invest as a state in fixing these downtowns. I'm proud to say that, Governor Shapiro is interested in that. So we have to put effort into creating those opportunities.
Thank you, Abigail. Ashley?
Yeah, so this is such a good question. I think what I'm going to refer back to is just not too long ago in 2019, the equity report that came out about this region being the worst place for a Black woman to live is really important for us to center. When we talk about poverty and we talk about a lack of investments in communities, that has been a really stark example, specifically in the 34th district. I serve on a board for Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, and one of our main focuses is how do we pull people out of poverty? And when you're doing that, it means equipping people with the knowledge, the information, and the resources that are needed, but also being aware of the trauma-informed practices that need to also be implemented. Because as much as you can talk about take steps A, B, and C, sometimes for certain communities, it's not just that simple or that clear. So making sure that we're taking into account what people have gone through, what people have experienced, and how we're investing in what does it look like to become an entrepreneur? How do you prepare yourself to become a homeowner? Home ownership specifically, that brings wealth into families that, if I'm frank, in a community like mine, isn't the reality. Specifically, Wilkinsburg is 60% renters and 40% homeowners. That in itself is an example of how we are not actually focusing on how do we reach people where they're at and share with them the resources and the opportunities that they have. One of the big things that really excited me about the work we do at Catapult is specifically in Wilkinsburg, we're doing some home ownership work. And oftentimes we don't talk about, when folks are receiving Section 8, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to use that for rent. You can use that for home ownership. And so it's changing the narrative, giving people the information that if you don't know, you don't know, and showing them how to invest in themselves and for their community so that we can lift everybody up.
So let's keep it here for a second. So you mentioned some of the statistics about home ownership versus renting. I'm a renter over here. We all know, I'm not sure if you guys rent, but we all know that those rent prices continue to climb year after year after year after year. And it can be extremely unaffordable, can obviously lead to people being unhoused and just not knowing how they are going to make ends meet. So the question that I want to ask you both is, what would your plans be to address the lack of rent control in this district? I'm going to give this one to Abigail first for this one. I'll let you go ahead and start.
Sure. So I'm actually excited to be hosting a policy hearing on this upcoming Monday in Rankin on blight and affordable housing, because I think that we have an opportunity to look at blight not as a detriment and not as a liability in this district, because we do have between 50 and 90% vacancy rates depending on where you are in the district. Some communities really have street after street after street that are just abandoned. You might have one house left on the street. So let's say we can't pass rent control, because we all know we can't get anything past the Senate right now. So let's just be reality based and say we can't pass any kind of rent control legislation. We have to focus on creating more affordable housing. But we have this paradox where we have all these empty properties, but we have not enough affordable housing. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the empty properties have been empty for 30, 40 years. The roofs are gone. There's no fixing them. It's too late. Once in a while you can rehab a property still, but for a lot of them, they're too far gone. It's too late. We have to make it possible for regular people, not big multimillionaire, billionaire developing companies, to access these properties and have people take them over and become homeowners that way, whether it's through conservatorship or other means, that people can actually take these opportunities on. Because there are a lot of people who would be happy to renovate a home, but they have no means to get it because our legal system is so confusing. We have tangled titles. How does conservatorship work? What's a sheriff's sale? How do all these programs work? It makes it incredibly impossible for somebody who is just a regular person to acquire a property. So that's one option. And, we unfortunately often demonize landlords, but you can't rent unless you have a landlord to rent to you. So we have to make it possible for more small scale landlords to acquire these properties and rent them out if we're not going to provide rent control to the district.
Thanks, Abigail. Ashley.
So what I also really want to bring into this is that housing is a human right. And when we talk about rent control and access to housing in our communities, I think what's been really important in just work that I've been a part of is most recently in Wilkinsburg, we started a land bank, which has been led by Renee Dolnay. And a lot of that work has been about accessing properties that are rehabable and investing in them and bringing them back into the options for sale in a way that's affordable for folks from within the community who may want to invest in home ownership for themselves, to be able to do that. Also, in addition to what I just shared about with the organization that I have served on the board with, Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, we have been doing workshops for the community to educate them. I think when we don't actually inform our community on what their rights are, what the access that they can have to the resources in their community, then they can make an informed choice for themselves and decide what is best for them, whether they're looking to become a homeowner or looking to find just a space for them to rent. And what does that process look like to begin to build themselves up for whatever may be next, whether that is home ownership or they find space where they're able to invest. And then another thing that I feel like I've been able to just see from a personal perspective, there's a community in the city of Pittsburgh, Belmar Gardens, which I think is a perfect example of affordable home ownership, where within that community, everybody owns their townhomes within that neighborhood after they made their purchase of their particular property. And then it's a collective investment within the community. And, so therefore, the grass is cut, the hedges are trimmed, the shovel is snowed, and everyone has a piece of ownership in that space. And I think that just means that there are so many options and opportunities of what we can do to make affordable housing a reality.
Yeah. So you guys both kind of touched individually on blight and talking about how you address infrastructure and making sure those hedges are trimmed, or trying to get those homes that are, not condemnable rehabbed and getting people in them. And so, the question that a lot of people have is, how do you do it? How do you address infrastructure in your neighborhood and blight, and tackle some of those things while also controlling gentrification? And that obviously is this very scary word for a lot of people, particularly in your district, but all across the Pittsburgh region and the state. So Ashley, I'll let you answer this one first.
I had to read the question because thank you. Thank you, Royce. So that word gentrification, it is scary, right? Because at the end of the day, what we have witnessed in our communities is that people come in with large dollars, they throw this money into the community. And I honestly think an example of that we've witnessed before our eyes is East Liberty. When I was a little girl, what East Liberty looked like then is not what it looks like now. And I understand that we want to have investments in our community, but there's a way that we do it without displacing the people that have been there, have lived there, and have been, that is their home. I think what that requires is for us to build up our communities, to recognize that we can take control of what what is ours before just feeling like we need to give up. Oftentimes, I think specifically like a community like mine in Wilkinsburg, we most recently had an issue with an annexation. And I think a big issue that was ahead of us as a community is not really having a full understanding of what does that look like. And when you come into a community and you don't give a full picture of what you're trying to do there, you get fear. You get people who are just simply misinformed and they check out. And so then we either lose it or we just don't make any investments, and then we continue to see displacement. So I think we control gentrification ultimately by making sure that we are keeping the community informed. We are giving options and opportunities for what investments look like. And I think we also require the state to invest in our communities. You know, we don't have to just accept that these dilapidated buildings are just going to be there. We can bring in money to tear down what can't be fixed, to invest in spaces that can be improved, and to do that with a community-centered and a community-led process. We know what we need for our communities. We just need to be afforded the opportunity to talk about it and be informed, and then work together to make, you know, that type of growth and progress and investment happen.
All right. Thank you. Abigail, how about you? How do you tackle infrastructure while also controlling gentrification?
So remember I said I'd talk about super sexy issues like sewers. I'm going to talk about a sewer lateral. So a sewer lateral is not the sewer that runs down the middle of the street, but the sewer pipe that goes from your house and connects to the sewer that's in the middle of the street. Why is that important? You might think that if your sewer lateral, which in our district is probably 100 years old and might be made of an old tree or creosote embedded into compressed wood chip board, and is, you know, probably was never all that strong to begin with, you might think that when that goes, that's not your problem. That's the Wilkinsburg Penn Joint Water Authority. That's Alcoasand. That's somebody else's problem. That's a municipality to fix. Sorry, friend, that's for you to fix. And guess how much it costs? It's like 50 grand. So if you live in a house like the row house that my husband and I lived in Wilkinsburg that cost $89,000, and you have a sewer lateral failure that costs $50,000, you might think, heck with it. Maybe we just go. So when I've talked to the Department of Public Works staffers in Wilkinsburg, one of them actually told me that one of the leading causes of home abandonment in Wilkinsburg is sewer lateral failure. So you might not really think about it too much, but you know, my car went through the street in front of my house when my neighbor's sewer lateral went. So it happens very regularly in these 1920s and pre-1920s neighborhoods. So how do you prevent gentrification while you fix infrastructure? Provide funding for people to fix their sewer laterals. Because if you can't fix yours, the only person who's going to come in and take over that house is somebody who's a gentrifier, because they can afford the full cost of the house plus that 50 grand to fix the sewer lateral. So like I said, sewers are not super sexy campaign issue to talk about, but they're one way that you can actually keep people in their homes and prevent gentrification while investing in your infrastructure in a municipality. So that's one reason why I really want to focus on providing either insurance or direct funding for repairing them.
I was not expecting to get an education on sewers tonight. Thank you. I think we all appreciate that. Thank you so much. Cool. Ashley, I want to circle back to a point that you brought up. We all know this has been a controversial topic, and it is that Wilkinsburg annexation. Mm-hmm. Do you have a position on that? And what do you personally think is in the best interest of the borough? And I'll let you start this one off.
Yes, thank you. So the annexation is a great conversation, because as I have been making some phone calls, I've had a few conversations about it. What we need to really talk about in our region of Western PA is the number of small boroughs and municipalities that we do have, and how the way we are operating isn't sustainable. And we do need to have a conversation about what does the future look like for our neighborhoods? So for Wilkinsburg, the the catchy phrase was, oh, we'll merge with the city of Pittsburgh and our taxes will be lowered. But that's not necessarily the true statement for everyone within our neighborhood, because although we were talking about school district property taxes, we weren't discussing the income tax that would have tripled for Wilkinsburg residents. And so depending on what your home value was, everyone's taxes weren't going to go down. Actually, a good bit of folks, their taxes were going to go up. And these were conversations that weren't fully being had. In addition to that, as a school board director, our kids were not being centered in how they would have been impacted by a decision like that. And so as a mom, as a parent of a school student in Wilkinsburg, I was not comfortable with that decision being made and not taking into consideration what will happen with our students, what will happen with our schools, and how will that impact their education. We do need to collectively have a conversation about how are we sharing our resources as a region, because we can't have all of these different, everyone needs their trash collected. Everyone needs a firefighters. Everyone needs their EMS, right? These are things that we know we need, but we can't make abrupt decisions for a community where everyone doesn't have a say-so in how we move forward and what that plan looks like.
All right. Thank you, Abigail. We'll have you weigh in next.
So I'm going to steal the slogan right off of Ashley's shirt, and I'm going to say, let the voters decide, because realistically, it should be up to the people of Wilkinsburg whether they want to be part of Pittsburgh, and it should be up to the people of Pittsburgh whether they want Wilkinsburg to be part of them. It's from my understanding, from talking to folks in Pittsburgh city government, that it would be to Pittsburgh's advantage for Wilkinsburg to join Pittsburgh, because it would add population, much needed population, to the city. However, we have to talk about, would it be to the benefit of the people of Wilkinsburg? Now, who better to decide than the people of Wilkinsburg? When I lived in Wilkinsburg, there was a referendum on whether to allow liquor licenses to be sold in the borough, because up until then it had been a dry borough. So people walked around getting signatures to get that on the ballot so that people could vote about it. They ultimately decided to allow liquor licenses, which people felt would be an economic development opportunity. I think that this is pretty much the same situation. You have to let people decide what's best for them. Who better to know what's best for someone than someone who's in that lived experience, right? So there are calculators that are available online for people to decide and look at their taxes and that sort of thing and figure out where they would be better off. However, I really think it's just up to what the individuals who live there want. I used to do international human rights law. I lived in Kosovo. If you would walk down the street on any given building, you would see spray painted on there, "Vetvendosje jo negociata," which means self-determination, no negotiation. So I am a big proponent of self-determination as an international human rights law principle, and I believe the same thing for my boroughs. If the people who live there want to vote that they want to join another municipality, so be it. If not, so be it. Determine for yourself.
I have a response to that in regards to the voters decide piece.
Sure. You know what? Actually, yes, but that's actually a question solely that I want to get to. Real quick, I want to remind everybody watching that we do want you guys to weigh in on this. So if you have questions for our candidates in this forum, make sure that you're commenting if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll try to get to those in the Q&A section after that. And I actually just read one of the comments that we have here from one of our Facebook viewers who really wants to know the answer to that question basically posed by Ashley's shirt. Can we show this shirt? Voters, let the voters decide. And so that is what somebody on our Facebook chat wants to know, really, is how do you guys as legislators really make sure that you are protecting voters' voices, and what your plans will be to make sure that that their voices are heard? Because you hear so many people all the time, and I know this probably sends like a sharp pain, up your spine for both of you guys when people say they're not listening, my vote doesn't matter, it doesn't count, it's just going to fall on deaf ears. So how do you change that narrative? How do you let people know that their voices are being heard? How can you reassure them, and what can you do specifically to address that issue? And Ashley, you had a thought, so why don't you go ahead and start that off?
Yes, I think it's misleading to say to let the voters decide specifically on the issue of the annexation, because there was only one side of the population that was getting an opportunity as residents to decide. It was not allowing residents of the city of Pittsburgh to actually have a choice on if they as a community also wanted to see another borough added into their city, when there's already neighborhoods when you drive through the city of Pittsburgh who are also facing very similar issues that Wilkinsburg has. And so to add an additional borough into the city on top of the issues that the city is already working to address, I think is really important that we are clear on that. And that wasn't a true reflection on what was happening with the annexation, because an annexation isn't a merger. An annexation is pretty much a takeover of a borough, and the city of Pittsburgh would have swallowed Wilkinsburg. And I think we would have actually continued to see further displacement. So we can't make choices like that simply off of a talking point of, oh, it'll increase the population for the city of Pittsburgh. If we really want to have a conversation about increasing the population of the city of Pittsburgh, that's a regional conversation that we should start to have, and not cherry picking one neighborhood. And now when we're thinking about protecting the power of the voice and how we ensure that we're encouraging people to be engaged in our government, our electoral process, I think it's also making sure that we're putting people out into the community who are inspiring people to actually want to be engaged and a part of their political process. Oftentimes we see candidates who are put into these places, but they're not actually going into the community to build with them. They're not actually going into the community, whether it's comfortable for them or not, and working to build that involvement and that engagement. That's been a lot of the work that I have done over the past several years. I have knocked on thousands of doors in my community, and I have heard a lot of feedback from what people are not satisfied with. And I think that is what we do to bring the power of folks' voice, the access to being able to vote. There are ways.
I'm sorry, Ashley. I'm gonna cut you off. We're out of time. I want Abigail to respond. You'll get a full 2 minutes, Abigail, to answer. And again, the question: how do you protect voters' voices? Is what one of our Facebook viewers wants to know.
Well, a big one would be not scheduling the primary on a high holy day for Jews. I think that it's important to be respectful of people's religious beliefs. I think that when you place a primary election on a date that is making it impossible for a lot of people to vote, or is putting a stumbling block in front of people so that they might not be able to get to the ballot box, you're intentionally disenfranchising a minority religion. So I think that's one thing that I've really emphasized to a lot of people. However, let's talk about how do you let people decide and protect the power of voice. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to this. We have in our state some legislation that would make it possible for people who are not registered to a party to be able to take part in our process. So as it is now, if you live in a district like District 34, you really only get to have a say in your municipal elections. If you, and to some extent, any kind of state rep election, maybe even Congress, if you are a registered Democrat. It's like an 80-85% Democratic district. So there are a lot of people who are looking in the state government committee to be able to allow people who are independent to have the right to vote in those types of elections, because otherwise they have to pretend to be a member of a political party or to have a certain ideology in order to vote. I think it's very interesting to explore having that move through the state government committee. It's something that I've had a lot of people email my office about and ask me to support, because they want to be able to have a say without having to say that they're a Democrat when they're not. So they might be a member of a third party or be independent, and they still want to have an opportunity to vote. I think that's something we owe it to our constituents to explore.
All right, thank you. So I want to circle back to the topic of education just a bit. You guys both have tackled certain talking points centered around education. The question that I have for you both is, what would your plan be to desegregate our public schools? Abigail, your turn.
So the largest school district in District 34 is the Woodland Hills School District, which was actually created to desegregate the schools in the district. So that, this was before my time and before Ashley Comans' time as well. But we have 3 school districts that make up District 34 schools. We have Pittsburgh Public, we have Wilkinsburg, and we have Woodland Hills. Woodland Hills schools used to be a lot of little neighborhood schools, but you had certain neighborhoods that were majority Black, certain neighborhoods that were majority white. And so the schools were very segregated. So there was a court decision that was made in order to desegregate the Woodland Hills schools. However, let me tell you that this has created essentially a white flight situation where people have fled the district, the school district, I should say. They still live there to some extent, but they have fled the district in terms of enrolling their kids there. So there are portions of District 34 in the Woodland Hills School District where as few as 9% of children attend public schools in Woodland Hills. So I think that that's something that is really a shame. Parents are missing out on having their children take part in an education that includes all kinds of people from all walks of life, which I think has an incredible educational value in and of itself. But one of the other issues is that we have people who will buy a house in the district. They'll stay until their first kid is maybe 4 years old, and then they'll leave and go to another school district so that they don't have to send their kids to a school in District 34. I think this is incredibly tragic. It contributes to a lot of turnover and gentrification, which we talked about earlier, because these houses are constantly turning over and increasing in value and making them unaffordable for more and more people. So we have to encourage people to see that there's a value to putting your kids in public schools with people from all different kinds of backgrounds, whatever race, creed, religion background they might come from, because otherwise people are going to continue to self-segregate, even though we desegregated the schools.
Thank you, Abigail. Ashley, what would your plan be to desegregate our public schools?
So our public schools are currently funded by property taxes. And so as we continue to have this conversation around fairly funding our public schools, making sure that we are not determining the investment in a school district, whether we're talking about Wilkinsburg, Woodland Hills, compared to a school district like Fox Chapel or Upper St. Clair. If we want to be really technical, specifically around a community like Wilkinsburg, where we consistently have these narratives in our community about, oh, the taxes are high. Oh, we don't want to purchase a home here. It's really layered in a statement. Right now in Wilkinsburg, since I've been serving on school board, we've been able to lower our taxes for our school district 6 mills over the past several years. But while we've been able to do that, we've really been able to strengthen our public schools with restructuring into an intermediate and primary focus, offering Spanish for our students pre-K to 6. We've added additional pre-K classes to meet the needs of our community. And what I often tell people is that the millage rate for a community like Wilkinsburg is very similar to a community like Mount Lebanon. But if we talk about the median home value of each of those communities, in Wilkinsburg, our median home value is probably, I want to say, I'm off the top of my head, about $80,000, and the median home value in a community like Mount Lebanon is $200,000. Those are two completely different values that are going to be invested into our school district, and that is how you continue to see segregation in our school districts, because families aren't going to want to invest their families or root themselves in a community because we are strictly seeing the funding of our schools because of the zip code that they live in. We must fairly fund our schools no matter where you live, whether you live in Wilkinsburg, whether you live in Churchill, whether you live in Mount Lebanon or Fox Chapel. All of our public schools deserve to be fairly funded to provide the needed resources so that every child gets an excellent education opportunity.
Would I be able to respond to that just for a moment?
Sure. Yep.
Thanks. So I hear the comment of lowering the school tax millage by 6 mills.
Mm-hmm.
Wilkinsburg no longer has a high school. So I think it's important for people who might not know that in the district to understand that Wilkinsburg high schoolers attend a Pittsburgh public school. So one of the important things that we have to do to talk about the desegregation element is that for quite some time, the Wilkinsburg high schoolers didn't have access to going to other schools other than Westinghouse. So they have an opportunity going forward if they want to apply to go to Alderdice or some of the other schools that are in the PPS system. I think it's important for people to understand that there is going to be that opportunity going forward. And I think that that's also a desegregation element, that people, from Wilkinsburg aren't just attending the one school that PPS allowed them to attend.
Ashley, would you like a minute?
Yeah, I need to respond to that. So, thank you. So yes, we do have the partnership with Pittsburgh Public Schools. And in addition to that, and this kind of goes into the annexation conversation, we also receive additional funding for the partnership that we have with Pittsburgh Public Schools from former State Rep Gainey and Senator Costa. That additional funding has been beneficial to making that partnership with Pittsburgh Public Schools work. And our students had access to the magnet program the moment that partnership started, because the community in Pittsburgh wanted to make sure that kids in Wilkinsburg did not have less of an opportunity for them to have access to the Pittsburgh Public School options, as well as us adding that Spanish curriculum for our kids so that they also had access to all of the magnet school options. And when we say we were able to lower our meals, we were able to do that because of that responsible handling of our finances as a district, and that partnership helped. So that is something that we should be discussing on how we are going to make sure we're fairly funding, because the partnership wouldn't work without that additional funding to make that fair.
So let's talk about that. So it seems like, would you guys both agree? It seems like there's a resources issue here, that like kids in Wilkinsburg, students in Wilkinsburg, and their parents want more access to some of the possible programs that may be available in other districts, right? Would you guys both agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what how do you solve that? Like, how do you bring those resources to the families in your district? And I'll let you answer that first. Oh gosh, I don't know who to give it to. I'll just go left to right. Abigail.
Okay. So the question is, how do we allow children in Wilkinsburg to have access to resources in Pittsburgh? Is that what you're asking?
Not even. I mean, how do you make the school districts in your district better so that they don't have to look outward for some of those resources that are available in other districts? Like, what would your plan be to improve that? I mean, you see like arts being cut, you see so many different programs that are sort of being taken away in certain districts because of funding. So just how do you improve that? How do you provide better access to things and more like cultural experiences, just things like that? How do you improve the experience for these kids so that they don't have to leave to broaden their education?
Unfortunately, the heartbreaking answer to a lot of questions is money. We have to put more money from a state level into local school districts. So it's not right that your zip code should determine your educational opportunities. You shouldn't be able to get a better education in Mount Lebanon or Sewickley than in Wilkinsburg or Swissvale. You should be able to have access to the same thing. So whether that means resource pooling at the state level and allocating on a per capita basis to try to make it fairer, but that's what we're going to be exploring in this year's budget, quite frankly. Governor Shapiro has announced a substantial investment, not just in education, but in the actual physical schools that the kids will attend, so that they don't have to be exposed to lead and asbestos, to say nothing of the teachers, of course, who work there and have to be exposed to those things as well. But we know the impact that lead has on developing minds. I think that, unfortunately, like I said, the answer to most questions when it comes to resources is just money. We have to be willing to put the money into places like Wilkinsburg that the kids in places like Mount Lebanon get. So that means that we have to have a fairer funding plan that addresses proportionality of bringing places that have not been the subject of strategic investment in schooling up to the level of other communities that have had more than their share of resources. So it really doesn't strike me as fair that if your parent or guardian is able to afford to live in a fancy area, that should determine your educational opportunities. That just doesn't make any sense to me. We should set every kid up for success and present them with those opportunities that I talked about earlier. So whatever success means to that individual child when they grow up, they should be able to seize it because everybody had the same chances.
All right, Ashley, your turn. How do you address some of those resource issues in districts in your district?
Yes, I mean, I think we're going to all hear this same message, right, about having a fair funding formula for public schools across Pennsylvania. And I think the way we do that, because also we are working with people who have different perspectives and ideas on what that looks like, right? Whether we talk about electing more people who are willing to work with the community, right? We have many community advocates who are consistently out in the community, who are traveling to Harrisburg to schedule meetings with their legislators, to tell stories and share experiences of what doesn't work. Because I also believe that in our communities, we do know what the solutions are to the issues that we're seeing that are facing our communities. And so we need to make sure that we are electing officials that are going to work with the community, whether we're in agreement with them or not. We need to also work with the community and build up our own movement and the political power of putting people in positions that are going to be in Harrisburg and fight for the investments that are needed, because it's not going to just happen because we are voting the right way. It's going to require advocacy. It's going to require meetings to speak with the folks that don't agree with us. It's going to require us to educate our community that, hey, we need to do some work in this neighborhood because I think we need to figure out who we can put in this particular position that's going to move the agenda so that we can see the policies pass to fairly fund our schools. At the end of the day, we can't keep playing with people who don't want to change in the way we need them to, so we can get the investments that we have in our community. So that requires us to, like I said, we need to do the work to flip our Senate. We need to do the work to increase our majority in the state house, because that means we just need to get the people who want to do the work so that we can fight for that future.
All right. Thank you both. So let's take it out of the neighborhoods for a moment and let's hit the road. Okay. So I know you guys are probably, taking some road trips, right? Summer is coming up. People are getting ready to travel out of state. They're going to go on vacation. One thing that bothers all of us who live here in Pennsylvania, we drive down the turnpike and we go through whatever, we come home and 2 weeks later, we get that envelope from the PA Turnpike and we see how much money we have to pay for that little trip to, I don't know, Erie or somewhere, Myrtle Beach or wherever we vacation, and how much we had to pay to get there. And so what a lot of people want to know is, what would you look for in a commissioner to reduce some of those turnpike fees and those costs that us as residents consequently end up having to come out of pocket for? What is your stance on this? And yes, what would you look for in a commissioner to tackle that? Ashley, we'll give this one to you.
So, my goodness, Royce, when you asked that question, I literally thought about turnpike bills, because yes. So the first thing, I actually think we need to go back to you pay when you go through. I think that that moment as a person who drives on the turnpike, when you pay, when you go, you get it out the way. The timing that it takes for those bills to even come back to you, you forget that you even drove on the turnpike and you have a bill that you need to pay. So that's the first thing, because also it makes me think about jobs, right? What happened to those jobs of those people who were working in the turnpike, who were making a fairly decent living doing those jobs? So that's my first thought. In regards to reducing the fees and tolls on the turnpike, I can be honest that just in general, I don't have enough background in regards to understanding or giving an answer, I should say, on what are the alternatives and options for being able to reduce those fees. But what I will say is that I do believe that as a state, we have other alternatives that we don't have to put the burden of needing to meet a tax on the backs of people who are just trying to travel to and from across our state. So I think that this is also a matter of looking at how are we not putting the burdens of fees or taxes that need to be paid on people who are literally just trying to travel to go to work, trying to make ends meet. Those aren't the best ways to go about meeting the needs of maintaining our turnpikes, maintaining our roads. We've got a pretty good amount of money just sitting in Harrisburg that I think could be used in a much better way.
All right, Abigail, take it away.
So in terms of what I would look for in a commissioner, it doesn't really matter because the turnpike commissioners aren't selected by me. But we do have turnpike commissioners who are placed in those positions. And we also have, of course, the Department of Transportation, PennDOT, the secretary of which, all of the secretaries of the department are chosen by the governor and then later on confirmed again in the higher house, not in the lower house. So we don't really have a role in that. The first time that we really meet them is in their capacities of presenting their budget requests. So I see the PennDOT folks, I see the secretary of every department in my role as a member of the Appropriations Committee. We just talked about transportation just today. We had transportation and we had state police as well. So I do spend a lot of time on the turnpike, more than the average person, probably just because of that 3.5-hour trip each way to and from the district to come to Harrisburg. If we want to look at the larger question of how do you reduce the fees and tolls on the turnpike, we do have a large budget surplus in Pennsylvania. We have, if you want to call it a rainy day fund, we do have money that is sitting around that could be invested in things like infrastructure. Because of Pennsylvania weather, the constant freeze thaw, all of the seasons impact on the surface of the road itself, they do require constant maintenance. So that is a huge monetary investment on an annual basis that has to happen. And so they want the money for the turnpike to come from the people who use the turnpike, which to some extent is a fair way of assessing a fee rather than just taxing us all as Pennsylvanians. Maybe some people have never even been on the turnpike and they would have to pay a turnpike tax. But I think that there's a wide variety of ways to explore making fees less expensive or more expensive based on how you think people should be paying for them.
Yeah. It's like getting that restaurant bill and you just looking at it like, something ain't right about this when you get that envelope in the mail from the turnpike. Okay, thank you both for that. Let's go ahead and take definitely a pivot here for this next question. And I want to ask you both, what role do you believe that you would have in reducing mass incarceration? What role do you have in reducing that? Any plans, to address that situation? Abigail, we'll go with you first.
Sure. So I would say, first off, we have to get rid of our stupid war on drugs. It's racist. It's pointless. It really just harms people who are not really doing anything wrong. They're selling plants in many cases. If we're literally talking in the House of Representatives about legalizing marijuana because it's part of the governor's tax plan in order to fund the state, why are people still getting arrested for selling marijuana? It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So I would say that that's a huge issue, is stop the ridiculous Nixon era war on drugs that was basically implemented to attack poor Black people, and just move on with our lives. The war on drugs didn't work. It was a stupid idea, and we need to move on and accept that it failed. Prohibition didn't work either when we tried to get rid of alcohol. So this isn't working. It's ridiculous. We need to stop, especially when we're talking about funding Pennsylvania's budget by selling the same things that people are going to prison for selling. Next thing is we have to have a conversation about life incarceration in Pennsylvania. In many states, when they say that you're going to prison for life, that really means like 15, 20 years. In Pennsylvania, life is life. So Representative Kincaid and I went with the Prison Society to visit Camp Hill. I've been up there a few times now. But on one occasion, we had the opportunity to meet with what they call the lifers, many of whom were incarcerated when they were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. We know from neuroscience that your frontal lobe isn't even developed at that age, and you aren't making decisions for the long term. You're doing what happens right now. So I think that we have to take a look at whether lifetime incarceration is right for Pennsylvania. We also have to revisit the felony murder statute in Pennsylvania, because people can go to prison for life if someone dies while they're committing a crime, even if the person who committed the crime didn't even touch the person, never intended to harm them, they're in prison for life. So there's 3 options for you.
All right, thanks, Abigail. Ashley, your turn.
Yeah. So when we talk about mass incarceration and what we're also looking at in our prisons and the disproportionate numbers of what the makeup is, what we do know is that there's over policing in Black and brown communities. What we do know is that there is a lack of investment in our communities, whether we're talking about making a livable wage, having access to good public education, and actually really seeing how do we address those root causes of poverty, which then in turn has people making choices that if they weren't in a dire situation, they probably wouldn't do. Mass incarceration is ultimately $1 billion business. And so people are looking at human bodies and figuring out ways that they can make money off of them. And so I think it's important that we talk about what's really happening and looking at our laws and how we are making sure that they're not continuing to perpetuate a system that wants to just continue to lock people up so that they can make money. Just in general, for me, in regards to the community, I have just recently been in conversation with friends who have been doing work specifically around family members who have been locked up since they were 16, 17 years old on things that basically a child did, where we know their brains are not fully developed. And so they're ultimately being held in a prison system that never really wanted to see them be a productive citizen, because at the end of the day, it was just about making money. So I think that we address the reduction of mass incarceration by investing in our communities. If we begin to invest in our communities, then people are going to have the things that they need, that we can live a productive lifestyle and be in community with one another, so that we aren't looking to just lock people up.
All right, thank you. Let's dive into the conversation about public safety, right? And how you address that. Abigail, what would your plan be to address public safety in the district?
I think you have to start out by defining what public safety means. For some people, public safety means, are you going to drive across a bridge and make it to the other side without risking plummeting into a ravine below? For other people, public safety means policing. So I always say you have to be safe with the police, but you also have to be safe from the police. So one thing that's happening in the district is we have 2 separate forms of regionalization that are happening simultaneously. So if you're looking at public safety from a policing perspective, then we have some interesting things going on. We have some of the boroughs, we have Braddock Hills and Swissvale are engaging in a slow form of shared service agreement, wherein Swissvale is Braddock Hills Police Department in an increasing number of days. It started back when I was on council with 1 day, and then 2 days, and then increasing. And we also have a regionalization that's going on in Rankin, East Pittsburgh, North Braddock. And that is a different form where they've actually dissolved their police departments and are creating new police departments. In speaking to the mayors of these different municipalities, one thing that they bring up to me is, what is our role going to be moving forward? Under the Pennsylvania Borough Code, which regulates small boroughs like what we have, the mayors are responsible for overseeing the police department. Now, if your police department regionalizes or merges with another one, what does your role become? So there is an oversight board that's being put together for the regionalization that's Rankin, East Pittsburgh, North Braddock, but there is no such board for the Braddock Hills, Swissvale form. So we have to look at, and I just had a meeting with some of my mayors over the weekend about this, what the role of the mayor is going to be going forward in ensuring that we don't have things like police brutality, or we want to look at maybe, is there enough diversity in our policing? So I think that there's a lot of changes that are going to be coming down the road, and those are some of those public safety ones.
All right, Ashley, how about you? Would your plan be to tackle public safety?
So in 2020, I was doing some work alongside the Alliance for Police Accountability and One Hood, and we had a whole report that we pulled together about reimagining public safety. I think it's really important when we're talking about public safety that doesn't mean police. Public safety means, how are we making sure that we are providing mental health resources for our community? When we have a crisis, it doesn't always mean that a police officer is the first person that should be responding to issues that may be impacting someone in our community. I think that public safety is, how do we feel safe in our own communities, and how are we making sure, and I'm going to take it back to what I've always said, how are we investing in our communities? Our communities are going to feel safe when they know that they have, a safe school that they can go to, when we know that we have community centers, when we know that we can be out in our neighborhood and we're able to just enjoy ourselves. Public safety requires us to make sure we are providing the needed resources across the board for the community. I am married to the mayor of Wilkinsburg, and so we have a lot of conversations about the work that is happening in the police department, and how we are making sure that we know that we don't have to over police our communities to make them feel safe. How are we building relationships? How are we showing up when there isn't something wrong? We're just showing up because we want to be in community, and we can know who, I'm going to take something from my fellow school board members always says, little Willie down the street knows that this is Officer Coffee, and we know his mom and dad, and we're building those relationships so that we can, continue to be in community with one another and feel safe.
Yeah, so that relationship building component is very important. And Abigail, you briefly touched on this in terms of diversifying police departments, and not just with people of color, but of course, more women and other minorities and marginalized groups. So plans to tackle that. Is there a solution for that? What is that solution to diversify police departments? And I'll let you answer first, Abigail.
So we had our hearing with the state police today, and I was a little bit shocked to learn that 92% of our state police troopers are men. That's, not really the numbers that I would expect to see. But in terms of diversification, one of the things that I'm proud of doing when I was on Swissvale Borough Council as the president is changing the way that we hired the police. Because when I first started as a council member, it was essentially the mayor and the police chief would meet any applicants, and then they would tell everyone else on council how they were supposed to vote. I would always vote no, or I would abstain. We actually had, I don't use the names of children who were murdered for political gain, so I'm not going to use the name of this child, but people will know who I mean. But we had a police shooting in the district of a young child, and it was incredibly tragic. And that man who shot that child, that officer worked for East Pittsburgh Borough, who subsequently dissolved their police department, but he also worked part-time for Swissvale. So he was hired by Swissvale Borough Council under that program of being told who to hire. So I said at that time, if I ever became council president, I would change the way that we hired the police officers. And when I became council president, I did. So we created a DEI committee on council who asked behavioral questions of applicants to make sure that they understood things like implicit bias, de-escalation. How do you work with people with autism? Again, I'm on the autism spectrum myself. It's incredibly important to me that you understand that some people are nonverbal if you're a police officer, and that you don't think that they're resisting and you don't try to kill them. So that's something that I'm proud of, in addition to bringing on a citizen onto the police committee, we then allowed every member of council to interview and vote on police hires in order to promote diversity in hiring.
Ashley, how about you? What would your work look like to diversify police departments within the district?
So I think my first thought, honestly, is that as a state representative, the hiring of police officers in our departments across this district, it's really interesting. One, we need to talk about actual funding. To be in any job, it should be a job that is, of course, paying you a livable wage. And I think oftentimes what we see in a lot of these small boroughs and municipalities is that that's not something that they are capable of actually providing. And so I personally, just when I'm thinking about all of our different levels of policing that we currently have, because we have a lot, it's your local, your county, your state. And then we can think about universities that may be in your community. I know for us in Wilkinsburg, we have Chatham University. So oftentimes we'll see the police officers from Chatham University coming through. I think when we're talking about diversifying our police departments, that is building the relationships, holding people accountable, and asking those questions of what are you doing when you are looking for an officer. I think we ultimately just need to be talking about safety, because our police departments, like I said, with the report that we did, we are not looking at a situation of needing to bring in a lot more police. I think that when we talk about policing, they're showing up after something happens. And so police departments need to be efficient. They need to be providing professional development so that they know what they are experiencing, and also making sure we're taking care of their mental health, right? Our police officers do take on a lot. So when we're diversifying our police departments, it's a very nuanced and that's a deep conversation that I think we can have a whole panel about.
Let's have a whole new episode with this. We'll bring you guys to talk about it.
Yes.
We'll have a whole new episode. I want to go ahead and dive back into the comment section. And so let's go ahead and have that Q&A. You guys remember, if you have any questions for our candidates for this forum, please ask them. This is the time to do that. We have a question from Osmond J. They're one of our YouTube viewers, who says, do you support and will you endorse Representative Summer Lee for her re-election for Congress? I will popcorn Ashley.
Yes, Summer Lee I have been down with Summer Lee since she first ran for this seat in 2018. I have been down with her since her congressional race. I have the support of Summer Lee in this race for the 34th House District, and I very much support her reelection to Congress for PA-12.
All right, Abigail?
I have not made an endorsement in the congressional. I believe that people should vote for whoever aligns with their beliefs. That race is spicy. That race is getting to be a lot. I will say that I have not made any endorsement. I don't intend to make any endorsement in PA-12. So people should vote for whoever they think is best candidate for them.
All right. Thank you both. We are running a little bit out of time here. I want to get to some of the very final questions that I have for the both of you guys. And really, one of the final ones is, why you? Why do you think that you are the best fit for this position? Abigail, I'll give this one to you first.
Sure. So I've been doing it for a year, so I already have at least a sense of what's going on here. But realistically, this district is made up of 13 different municipalities. One of the municipalities is the city of Pittsburgh. The rest are small boroughs and townships. I have 5 years of local government experience in Swissvale Borough, so I really enjoy local government work. I asked to be put on local government committee in Harrisburg, and I want to do that work. I've held 2 annual intermunicipal meetings to bring the elected officials together. We have over 100 elected officials just on the boroughs and townships, councils in the district. And I really enjoy helping them to get money for their communities and help them to get what they need. I ran the Municipal Grant Assistance Program to help low-income municipalities have access to grants. Because while, my mother is the finance director in Wilkinsburg and does a fine job of applying for many grants, not everybody has my mom to be able to do their grant applications for them. So, I have a love of local government that my mother instilled in me from when I was a kid in the 80s, and she was an elected official in our little town. I think that all of these little municipalities have their own personalities, which I love. They have an amazing number of nonprofit organizations. I've been an attorney for nonprofit organizations for about a decade now. I'm a small business owner, so I understand how to work with small businesses and bring them into the district and make them feel comfortable and successful. And I also understand how the grants process works, both through appropriations and working with local foundations. If anybody has not yet had the opportunity to apply to the grant writing scholarship program that I created with CCAC, Homewood Brushton, the Pittsburgh Foundation, and the Health and Education Alliance, please make sure that you get in touch with my office by March 15th, and we will give you the email address for the person that you need to send your application to, because it is my goal that everybody has the opportunity to access resources in the district.
Thanks, Abigail. Ashley, your turn. Why you? Why would you be the best fit for this position?
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong resident of the 34th House District, born and raised in this community. It is my home. I ran for school board because I wanted to see better schools for our community and for my future children, which is now the exact place that I send my daughter to elementary school. And I know that this work to continue to do this fight is so important. I got behind a very strong leader in Summer Lee when she originally ran for this seat and broke a glass ceiling for Western PA. I think it's really important that we look at what it means to bring in a leader that knows that no matter where you live, no matter how much money you make, no matter what you look like, no matter who you pray to, that you live in a community that is safe and that we can have a future where we have affordable housing, where we can have a livable wage, we can have paid family and medical leave, where we can fairly fund our public schools, and we can really fight for something that is going to make a difference in our livelihoods and in our community as a whole. I believe that right now we have a representative that wants to do things the old way and meet the needs of an establishment that has not been meeting the needs of our community, and it is not time for us to go backwards. I believe that it is so important that we continue to lead, whether you live in East Pittsburgh, Edgewood, Chalfont, Churchill, Wilkins Township, or Wilkinsburg. No matter what, you have a representative that is going to bring you into this work and bring you into making a change for our future. 2016 was scary. I'll never forget waking up and bawling my eyes out because of what happened with the election of Donald Trump. And what we have seen since 2016 with this progressive movement and bringing in leaders like Summer, like Sarah, like Ed, we cannot go back. And it is time for us to really get to work, because this moment in our life requires more from all of us. I know that I'm going to be the fighter in Harrisburg that communities need. And I do hope to get the support of this community on April 23rd in that primary election, because we cannot go back and we have so much more work that we need to get done, and I'm ready to get to work and do that.
All right, thank you. I kind of lied to you both. I do want to ask one more question from our comment section. Khadijah from Facebook has a really interesting question that we really didn't get into today, which is how would you make childcare affordable, and would you support universal childcare in PA? So Ashley, I'm getting a big head nod from you. So that's what I'm going to go to. I'll go to you first for this one.
Yes, childcare is so important. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that, one, we need universal pre-K. Me being able to send my daughter to pre-K at the age of 3 was truly a relief for our family. I also, prior to that, childcare for a 2-parent income is still not affordable for someone like my family. We would really have to pinch pennies to make that happen. We also need to make sure that we're investing in our children from birth to 3, because if our young people aren't prepared for learning when they get to pre-K, they're already behind. And I think it's really important that communities are receiving the investments that are needed so that they can afford quality and accessible childcare. I immediately think about organizations like the Early Excellence Project, which Congressman DeLuzio actually funded. They received like $500,000 to increase the support of daycares that typically don't receive investment so that they can pay their childcare workers to provide quality care, so that they can also increase their STARS ratings to receive more money, to pay their staff, and to also provide additional care. And if we start with our young people in that space of early learning, we are going to see that progress once they get into school. Because if a child doesn't know how to read by the time they hit 3rd grade, we know what the outcomes are for our communities, and we can't afford to continue to let that happen. So it is extremely important that we have some investments from our state into that early learning space, so that every single family can have access to quality and affordable childcare. Because if we don't invest in our babies, then we're not investing in our future.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Abigail, how about you? How would you make childcare affordable, and would you support universal childcare in PA? This question comes from Khadijah from the Facebook comments.
So I would support universal childcare. How do we make it affordable? Well, one thing is we don't even have enough of it. So no matter how much it costs, for some people, you can't have it at any price, because we just don't have enough childcare centers that are available. Some of that is because we don't put enough state money into it. As I said earlier, unfortunately, the answer to a lot of questions is more money. It has to just be put into things. It's very simple. We have to pay for the things that we say that we value. We say in our society we value kids, but we don't put money into their schools. We say in our society that we value moms, but we don't make life easy for them. We say in our society that we want kids to have a great start out in life, but we don't put our money where our mouth is. So unless we start putting money from the state budget into childcare, we're not going to see any improvements there. And it has consequences across different types of, or different portions of people's lives. So for instance, if you're a woman and you have a child, many people will choose to stay home out of financial necessity. Now, if somebody wants to stay home because they want to stay home, I love that decision for you. But if somebody chooses to stay home because they can't afford childcare, that's not acceptable. Because what ends up happening is we then create a 2-tiered system in our employment where women are held back for 10 or more years, depending on how long it takes them to stay home and raise their children to a point where they feel comfortable to re-enter the workforce. And we miss out on the valuable contributions of those intelligent women who could have made those contributions. And I don't want to discount the men who stay home with their kids and do childcare as well. We miss out on their contributions. So again, the answer to this question is we got to put money into it from the state to create more childcare and make it affordable.
All right. Thank you both for answering that question. What do you say we end the evening on an up note? The question is, and you better not say getting off of this call with your crazy self, Royce. What brings you joy? Again, you cannot say, Royce, not asking me any more questions. Abigail, I'll start with you.
What brings me joy is that I stood up on the House floor 3 times now during appropriations hearings and talked about having autism. I was diagnosed with Asperger's in the 2010s when it was still called that, and it's been folded in with autism now on the autism spectrum. And I have received so many beautiful messages, emails to my office, messages through social media about how much it meant to see somebody represented who was either like them or like their kid, and who made them believe that they could have success. I really want to make it normalized that people talk about being neurodivergent and make it very clear that you can be successful and that you can't let anybody tear you down or hold you back from your goals, or say that you can't speak up for yourself or for others like you. That gives me joy, all of those nice messages that I've heard from people.
Awesome. Ashley, how about you? What brings you joy?
What brings me joy is my family, my husband, and my 2 children, Bellamy and Bo. That is my inspiration in the work that I do and the fight that I have in this space. I believe that we do need to see more moms in elected office and at higher levels of elected office, because as a mom, the perspective that we bring fighting for our children who have many different needs is extremely important. The way I will fight for my own children is the way that I would fight for my own community, because I believe that that's super important. So I personally cannot wait to get home and off of this call with you, Royce, so that I can go home and hug my kids. I'm personally still thinking about the hug that my son gave me before I walked out of the house this morning. And it's that kind of motivation that keeps the joy in my heart and inspires the fight that I have for this work that I do.
Nice. Thank you. Let's make sure that people can stay connected with you and get some more information. So, Ashley, how can people connect with you and your campaign?
Yeah, so our website is ashleycomans.com. On social media, everywhere, it is Ashley R. Comans. My middle name is Renee. And if you want to email us, it's hello@ashleycomans.com.
All right, Abigail, how about you? How can people get in touch with you?
If you want to go to the campaign website, it's Salisbury 4PA, FORPA, Salisbury like the steak, 4PA.com. Or you can follow me on Facebook. I'm a Facebook gal. What can I say? I'm just a little older and I'm stuck in my ways. So
we're gonna get you on TikTok, friend.
Oh my
God. Both of you, are you on TikTok, Ashley?
I'm on TikTok. I'm you know, I do more scrolling than posting.
Right. Yeah, totally fair. Well, hey, thank you guys both for your time this evening. Thank you to the viewers for tuning in, sharing some of your thoughts and questions with us as well. We appreciate you guys both, and good luck to the both of you.
Thank you
so much.
Yes, and we want to go ahead and give you guys at home a reminder. April 23rd, 2024 is the primary election. Polls are open on election day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Last day to register to vote is April 8th, 2024. That is this year. Last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot is April 16th. Thank you for watching tonight. My name is Royce Jones. We appreciate you all for tuning in. We want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, New Pennsylvania Project, Straight Ahead, and One Hood Power. We hope you had some time to really learn more about this election, as well as the candidates, and hopefully you are leaving enlightened and educated as you plan to make your vote on April 23rd. Again, my name is Royce Jones. Appreciate you for watching. Have a good night.
My name is Jasmine Green. I'm the Director of Education here at One Hood Media. Voting is important. It's not necessarily a tool for liberation, but it is a form of harm reduction. So in order for us to create the futures that are going to better serve us, we need to put representatives in place that can hear our voices, put the policies that are needed in order to keep our community safe, and get us to a place where we can strive for our own liberation.
So, I guess not.
Yeah, I think so.